how there's no reason to change in the status quo. There's no warrants for the affirmative plan. First, let's take a look at the issue of the criterion. The affirmative asks that we look at net benefits as well as soft issues. Well, let's do both, but let's first take at the issue of stock issues. Let's look at standards of policy debate, then merits of policy change to determine whether or not the affirmative ballot should be passed. And it should be passed, and it should be weighed through both. The affirmative must uphold both of these criteria in order for the ballot to be merited. The plan must go through the highest level of scrutiny before we pass this plan that would have massive effects on the United States and on the world. So they should uphold both of these criteria in order for the ballot to be merited. Let's take a look at the issue of Iran and North Korea and whether or not they are suicidal in the status quo. Now, the affirmative talked about how deterrence fails right now, and that there may be a change of leadership that would change Russia's mind, that would change Iran and North Korea's mind. However, this doesn't apply. I refer you back to the analogy I made that the United States is a tank and Iran and North Korea are two people with pistols. These nations both want to see their country become actually a world power. The leader of Iran has come out stating he wants Iran to become a world power. And what's going to stop them from becoming a world power? The United States firing a nuclear weapon at them. Russia doesn't want a nuclear weapon. Iran rather doesn't want a nuclear weapon to be fired at them. Therefore, they're not going to fire one at the United States. They have a fear of retaliation from the United States. Therefore, they are deterred by our missiles, by our nuclear weapons that they would fire back at them to retaliate. And then they keep talking about how we didn't actually talk about North Korea in the ethics. However, it's the same situation here. North Korea and Iran are both enemies of the United States. They're both small nations, and they don't want their nations to be blown up. They don't want to be killed just for nothing, just to see the United States shoot down the missiles and then shoot them back for retaliation. Now let's take a look at the issue of whether or not the United States actually could shoot down the missiles. The affirmative main response was that the tests are rigged in the status quo. Our response is that their sources are incredible. Now, by incredible, I don't mean they're awesome. I mean they're not credible for this topic. Now, why is this? It's because the affirmative team has quoted random analysts. Now, while I respect these analysts, they don't have access to top government files. They don't have access to all the government tests. I'll tell you who do has access to those tests, and that is the director of the Missile Defense Agency, whom we referenced his statement about the Missile Defense Agency. Now, they say that he's a biased source. This isn't true. He's the resident expert on our missile defense right now. He's analyzing the past 16 tests that have been done, and his results are that Iran must fire 10 ICBMs at us in order for them to actually get through our defense. And Iran does not have that capability. There's no threat in the status quo. Let's take a look at the issue of whether or not we get something out of working with Russia. The affirmative responded by, first of all, enhanced systems, second, Russian goodwill. However, we need to know exactly what we will get from Russia. The affirmative just had a vague, generic response about, oh, we get to go to Russian facilities, or, oh, we get to have good relations with Russia, oh, we get political goodwill. But we need to see specifics of exactly what technology will be enhanced with Russia. On the issue of exact technology, let's take a look at that. The affirmative said that in a real-world scenario, that the Department of Defense will pick the technology. Well, if we're talking about real-world scenarios, the Department of Defense would also be consulted before we pass this bill in Congress. The Department of Defense would be part of this decision. So the real-world scenario can't be upheld by the affirmative team. They haven't defined the simplest terms of their case. In order for it to be passed, we need to know these terms, and they haven't been provided. Take a look at the issue of unproven missiles. The affirmative talked about how we did tests in 1997. My response is outdated tests. Outdated tests. Now, I'm not talking about how the drones have deteriorated over the years. I'm asking whether or not the drones have adapted to the threats of the current system. We need a very, very recent test of the drones in order for them to be proved effective of the current threats. Our current defenses are proven effective of these threats. The drones, so far in this round, have not been. Therefore, the ballot is not merited on the issue of sovereignty. Finally, let's look at Russian cooperation. The affirmative team still didn't provide with piece of evidence from Russia that they were to cooperate on drones. This specific evidence still has not been presented by the affirmative team. Finally, let's look at the issue of Romania. I'm going to read a quote from Interfax News Agency, which is a Russian news agency in Moscow. They said in May 2011, quote, the understanding between the United States and Romania on the deployment of anti-missiles in Romania aroused apprehensions in Russia. The general said this violates the Russian-U.S. understanding on the plans of a joint missile defense in Europe, unquote. So right now, Russia thinks that the United States is going back on our word to cooperate with them. Right now, cooperation is unrealistic. Why? Because of these recent tensions. We have this missile system in Romania that Russia is very, very upset at. And right now, Russia does not trust the United States to cooperate on missile defense because they think we're going back on our agreement by putting this missile shield in Romania. So we see that there is no reason to change. Therefore, there is reason not to change. I ask for the negative ballot. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking for you today.
The words "death to America" are the words of fanatics, and unfortunately also the words on the lips of world leaders who will soon have nuclear technology with which to hit the United States. That is the backdrop of this speech that I'm going to give. And I'm going to be defending our case, starting out with the disadvantage. They talk about how Russia is an unreliable partner. The first point here was that Russia supports Iran, and that Russia supports Iran's nuclear program. My response to this first point, that they support Iran's nuclear program, is that their own evidence disproves. Cooperation stopped. This was the article they read. Quote, Russia and Iran seem to be good friends, but in recent weeks the relationship has unraveled. President Dmitry Medvedev publicly questioned the Iranian program, which is moving into a position that may allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. At the same time, Russia has an increasingly important military and security relationship with Israel. Russia is no longer very good friends with Iran. In fact, as we can see in their second point, sanctions opposed, this is false. The Associated Press in May 26, 2011 said that Russia changed their opinion. Quote, Michael McFall, actually wait, let me move on and talk about, this is false, this is the evidence, this is Voice America News. In June 2009, Russia actually decided we were right. Defense Secretary Robert Gates reported that the Russians had come back to us and acknowledged that we were right in terms of the nearness of the Iranian missile threat and that they had been wrong. My hope is that we can build on that while they were partner with us going forward. Russia decided they were on our side. Now let me talk about the Romanian shield really quickly. The Romanian shield is part of our current missile defense. Now this doesn't apply because our current defenses are a threat to Russia. That's what Russia is afraid of. The evidence from the Associated Press in May 2011 said Mike McFall put the problem plainly after the meeting with the Russians. Russia hadn't let go of the fear that the U.S. would end up threatening Russia's own missile arsenal. So Russia's afraid of us. But what we can see in my second point is that our drone defenses aren't actually a threat to Russia. George Lewis in 2010 said, quote, because the drone fleet would be small and would carry only a small number of interceptors, it would not be possible to redirect such a defense against Russia. Our drone defenses aren't a threat to Russia, so Russia isn't worried about them. And I have a couple general responses. My first general response is that Russia is actually afraid of Iran. As my evidence already said, Russia doesn't want to have a nation with nuclear weapons that's a rogue nation right next to them either. Secondly, my second response to this is that Russia and Iran are no longer friends. Reuters in October 2010 said, quote, Russia has expressed increasing frustration with Iran's refusal to suspend enrichment. Moscow endorsed harsher UN sanctions against Iran and later announced it would not fulfill a contract to sell air defense missile systems to the Islamic Republic. Russia is just as afraid of Iran as the United States is. And as they have already asked to cooperate with missile defense, Russia will cooperate. Now let me talk about the problem. Point B. The affirmative team said that through their response that Iran and North Korea aren't suicidal. My response is that this doesn't respond to my partner's response. They don't care. It may be suicidal, and that's true, but they're fanatics, so they don't care. But secondly, they dropped the argument that the leadership of Iran might change. That wasn't addressed. They're still a threat. Under the current system, they said that our sources weren't credible because they were just analysts. In fact, this isn't true. We cited, for example, Lewis and Postal, MIT professors of technology, which is a place where actually some of the missile defense technology currently used is in fact tested and developed. These aren't just analysts, they're credible sources. They said the government sources were good, but dropped Andrews' warrants why the government sources were biased. They have to blow up making inflated claims about our system in order to protect us. The government is a biased source. Now they said we need to know exactly what we get from Russia, and my response is we provided reasons why working with Russia gave us good benefits. Now we can't list out exactly everything we get, but we know it will be good for political relations, and it would be good to work with Russia for the effectiveness of the system and having that territory near Iran. That's all we need to know that cooperation will be helpful. The solvency point was that our missiles were improving. They said our tests were outdated. I have two responses. First of all, technology doesn't regress over time. Drone technology has only gotten better. Secondly, we read new evidence on our advantages that proved the system was effective. This is my partner's response from the 2AC, and they dropped it. We read recent evidence saying the system was effective. Now, their last point was that there wasn't any evidence Russia would cooperate specifically on drones. My first response is that Russia wants to cooperate on missile defenses, and this is a kind of missile defense. But secondly, as I've already outlined, Russia likes this kind of system specifically because this isn't a threat to Russia. Right now, Russia is mad at us because our defense systems right now might threaten them, but if we implement this system, Russia feels okay with that because it isn't a threat to them. And Russia is just as scared of Iran as we are. So Russia will work with us to create this system which will be beneficial for both nations. Thank you.